My hands, they are not the hands of youth anymore. The skin hangs loose, soft as worn paper, folded by time into valleys of wrinkles. These hands once held a newborn, stitched torn clothes in candlelight, kneaded bread when there was hardly flour, and wiped away tears no one else saw. Now they tremble, but not from weakness, rather from the weight of everything they have carried. My eyes, oh, they are tired. Not blind, not yet, but weary in the way that comes from seeing too much. Love and betrayal, hunger and survival, laughter that slipped away like smoke between fingers, and grief, the kind that burrows into your bones until even your dreams ache. But within these eyes, if you look close enough, you'll still find a spark. Gentle, fragile, but alive, a spark that refuses to die, even when the world tried to snuff it out. And my voice, listen closely, it is cracked, heavy, carrying the dust of years and the salt of tears. Yet beneath the cracks, there is something else. Wisdom carved by pain, courage carved by loss, and hope carved by sacrifice. I speak now, not to seek forgiveness, not to justify, but to tell the truth of a life lived between silence and storms. My son once told me to stay out of his marriage. His words cut deeper than any knife, for they carried not only rejection but dismissal of all I had endured for him. So, I did what no one expected. I took back the house I had gifted him. But this story is not only about a house. It is about love, loss, resilience, and the stubborn beating of a heart that refused to break, even when everything else around it did. So, sit with me, if you can bear it. Sit with me inside this fragile moment of time, as my wrinkled hands unfold the pages of memory. Because before you judge me, you must know me. The house was never just bricks and wood to me. It was the sum of years, years of hunger, of saving coins in a rusted tin, of choosing patched shoes over new ones, of watching the sun rise and set while my hands ached from endless work. Every wall held a memory. Every corner carried a whisper of my struggle. I still remember the day I handed the keys to my son. My fingers shook as the cool metal touched his palm. It was not just a gift. It was my life, poured into stone and timber, placed into his hands with trembling hope. I thought, perhaps, that he would see what it meant. That he would know this house was built not of cement but of sacrifice. His wedding day had been bright, filled with laughter that rang like bells I once believed I'd never hear. I stood there, watching him start a life I had fought tooth and nail to give him. My heart swelled with pride, and yet, deep within, there was a silence that always follows mothers who have given too much, who have nothing left but the hope that their children will carry their love with honor. But hopes, I have learned, are fragile things. They can shatter in a single breath. It was not long after that day when he looked me in the eye, my own flesh, my own blood, and said words that sliced through me. Stay out of my marriage. He did not know the weight of those words. Perhaps he thought them harmless, a boundary set by a man who believed his new life was his alone. But to me, oh, to me, those words carried centuries of dismissal. They told me I was no longer needed, no longer wanted, that the hands that raised him, the eyes that watched over him, the heart that bled for him, were now to be cast aside like old furniture. I smiled, though my chest burned. I nodded, though my soul trembled. And in the quiet of my own heart, I made a choice. If my love was no longer welcome, if my presence was to be silenced, then I would reclaim the only thing in this world that was truly mine. The house I gave away. And in taking it back, I took back not just walls and windows, but pieces of myself that I had surrendered far too easily. I was not born into comfort. My first memories are not of soft blankets or warm kitchens, but of dust. Thick, heavy dust that clung to our skin, our clothes, our lungs. It filled the cracks of the floor, settled on our meager food, and lingered in the air like a reminder that even breathing came with struggle. Hunger was my oldest companion. It gnawed at my stomach like a wild animal, day after day. Bread was a luxury, milk a dream. Many nights, my ribs ached as I lay on the hard ground, listening to the emptiness of my belly echo in the silence. Sometimes I would press my small hands against my stomach, as if I could quiet the growling with the warmth of my own touch. Clothes, they were never new. My dresses were hand-me-downs, patched until the fabric was more thread than cloth. The shoes on my feet always had holes, and in the cold seasons, my toes would burn and numb from the frost. But I still wore them with pride, because to have even broken shoes was better than none. And yet, within that life of scarcity, there were fragments of beauty. I remember the sky. How wide and endless it seemed when I lay on the dry earth, looking up at clouds drifting like ships across a sea of blue. The world could take away bread, it could take away warmth, but it could never take the sky. That was the first time I learned that beauty often lives in what costs nothing. I also remember my hands, small then, but already called to work. They picked weeds from the fields, carried water heavier than my frame, scrubbed floors until my knuckles bled. Those same hands that now tremble with age were once blistered and raw, yet stubbornly strong. Work became the rhythm of my childhood. Each task a drumbeat that told me survival was my only song. But what hurt the most was not the hunger of the body, it was the hunger of the heart, the hunger for tenderness. For someone to hold me and tell me the world would one day be softer, kinder. Instead, silence was my lullaby, and resilience became my mother's milk. Still, I grew. Not tall, not strong, but enduring, like a weed that pushes through cracks in stone. I found a way to live where living seemed impossible, and each hardship etched itself into me, shaping the woman I would one day become. I did not know it then, but every pang of hunger, every ragged breath, every night spent staring at the empty ceiling, was carving a strength into my bones that no one could take from me. And perhaps that is why, when my son's words cut me years later, I did not break. I had been broken long before, and every time, I stitched myself back together. That is what hunger taught me, that survival is not the absence of suffering, but the courage to keep breathing in spite of it. There was a time when my heart was not weighed down by wrinkles of sorrow, when it beat quick and reckless like the wings of a bird. A time when I believed love could lift me out of the dust, when the sound of laughter could drown out the growl of hunger. I met him on a day when the air smelled of rain and earth. My dress was plain, my shoes worn thin, but his eyes saw me, as though I were draped in silk. I remember how he smiled, hesitant, gentle, as if he feared his joy might scare me away. And perhaps it did, for I was not used to such kindness. I had grown up expecting nothing, and yet here stood a man who looked at me as though I were everything. He was not rich. No, riches were never part of my story. He worked with his hands, calloused and strong, and his laugh was a melody that made even the darkest corners of my soul light up. He would speak to me as though my thoughts mattered, as though my silence was not emptiness, but music he longed to hear. We had nothing, and yet with him, I felt as though I had the world. There were evenings when we would sit beneath the fading sky, and I would rest my head against his shoulder. The fields stretched out around us, the crickets sang, and for a moment, poverty disappeared. In those stolen hours, I was not the girl of hunger and rags. I was a woman loved. Love, you see, does not ask about the weight of your purse or the scars on your hands. It simply arrives, fierce and fragile, and fills you until you are spilling over with it. But love is also cruel. It was too soon, too sudden, when illness came. A cough at first, then fever, then a silence that no prayer could break. I watched him fade like mist in the morning sun, his once strong hands trembling as they reached for mine. I begged, I pleaded, I prayed. Oh, how I prayed, but the heavens remained silent. The night he left this world, I sat beside him, my hand clutching his as though my grip could anchor his soul to mine. His breath grew shallow, his eyes half closed, but even then, he found the strength to whisper, "Live, for me." And then he was gone. Just like that, the laughter, the warmth, the dreams we had woven together, all vanished into the stillness of death. I was young, far too young to be a widow, far too young to carry grief that heavy. Yet there I was, with my heart split open, trying to breathe in a world that no longer had him in it. The mornings that followed were merciless. His absence was everywhere, in the empty chair, in the silence of evenings, in the hollow ache of my chest. For months, I wandered through life like a ghost, moving because I had to, not because I wanted to. Every place we had walked together became a wound. Every song of laughter from others became salt on raw skin. But grief, like hunger, does not kill you. It reshapes you. Slowly, painfully, it teaches you to live with the emptiness. It teaches you to hold on to memories like lifelines, even when they burn. And so, I did what he asked. I lived. I carried him in the quiet spaces of my soul, a shadow stitched into every step I took. His love never left me. It simply became invisible, like air. To this day, when the evening sun turns the sky into a golden fire, I feel him. I hear his laugh carried on the wind. I see his eyes in the shadows of twilight. And though my hands are wrinkled now, and my heart tired, he remains the man I loved, the man I lost, and the man who taught me that love, real love, is worth every scar it leaves behind. When he was gone, I thought my heart could not carry any more weight. I thought grief had broken me for good. But life is never finished with you, even when you are finished with it. Not long after his passing, I held my son in my arms, small and fragile, his cries piercing through the silence of our home. His father would never hold him. He would never hear his first word, never see his first step. That truth nearly shattered me. Yet, when my child's tiny hand curled around my finger, I felt something shift. My heart, though bruised and broken, began to beat with a new purpose. From that moment, I lived not for myself, but for him. Raising a child alone is like walking into a storm with nothing but your bare skin. There were nights when the cupboard was nearly empty, and I would boil water and pretend it was soup so he could drink and feel warmth in his belly. There were days I went without eating so that he could have the last piece of bread. Hunger became a shadow that followed us both, but I shielded him from it as best I could. My hands, these wrinkled, trembling hands you see now, were once raw from endless work. They scrubbed floors until the skin split, stitched clothes until my eyes blurred, carried baskets heavier than my body. Every coin I earned was stretched until it cried. Shoes were mended, clothes patched, meals made from scraps that others would have thrown away. But what hurt more than the hunger or the labor was the loneliness. Nights were the hardest. When he was asleep, his breath soft and steady beside me, I would stare into the darkness and ache for the man who should have been there with us. I would whisper to the shadows, asking him if he could see us, if he knew how hard it was. There were times I wanted to give up, times when the world seemed too heavy for one pair of shoulders. But every morning, my son's eyes would meet mine, eyes that carried traces of his father, and I would rise again. Somehow, I would always rise. I taught him everything I knew: to value work, to respect kindness, to understand that though we were poor in wealth, we were rich in endurance. When other children had toys, he had stories. I would sit beside him at night, weaving tales from my imagination, trying to paint magic into a life that was often too heavy for his young heart. His laughter became my reward, his small joys my victories. I missed so much of myself in those years. I missed youth, missed rest, missed the chance to be anything other than a mother clinging to survival. But I do not regret it. For every wrinkle carved into my skin, every gray hair earned, was proof that I fought, that I gave him everything I could. Still deep inside, a part of me longed to be seen. Not as a provider, not as a tireless worker, not even as a mother, but as a woman who once loved, who once dreamed. That part of me grew quiet over the years, like a candle burning itself out. But my son, he was the flame I protected. I shielded him with my body, my labor, my very soul. And though he would never truly understand the cost, I gave him my years so that he could have his. Now, when I look at these tired hands, I see the proof of every sacrifice. I see bread I went without, nights I cried in silence, mornings I rose from exhaustion. And though my heart aches at what I lost, I cannot deny what I gained. I raised him, alone, against the odds, against the silence, against the hunger. I raised him, and in doing so, I raised myself from the ashes of despair. For years, I lived as if the world owed me nothing, and perhaps it never did. But deep inside me, there was always a vision, faint at first, like a candle flickering in the distance. A house, not a palace, not something grand, but a place that belonged to me, to us. The house became my dream long before I could afford even a single brick. It was born out of nights when rain slipped through the roof and dampened my child's blanket. It was born out of mornings when I swept dust from corners, knowing it would return with the next gust of wind through broken walls. It was born out of hunger, yes, but also out of dignity, the stubborn hope that one day my son would wake up in a place that felt safe. I worked for that dream with hands that never rested. My fingers stitched clothes until the needle drew blood. My back bent under loads that no woman should carry. Every coin I earned was hidden away, not for clothes, not for food beyond necessity, but for the house. People thought me foolish. They said, "What good is saving when there is nothing to eat?" But I knew hunger would pass, as it always had. What I sought was not just survival, it was permanence. Brick by brick, year by year, I built that dream in my mind until one day it stood before me in flesh and stone. The first time I saw it, unfinished, walls still bare, I cried. Not the tears of grief I had shed too often, but tears that carried both exhaustion and triumph. I placed my palm against the rough wall, and I felt my life written there, every blister, every skipped meal, every silent prayer. When the roof was finally set, I walked through the empty rooms in silence. I touched the windowsills, the doorframe, the walls that still smelled of cement. I imagined my son running through the halls, laughter echoing off walls that had been bought with my blood. I imagined a table where meals would be shared without fear of scarcity. I imagined warmth, not only from the hearth, but from the knowledge that this was ours. That house was not shelter alone, it was redemption. It was proof that suffering could be turned into something tangible, that sacrifice could stand tall in brick and mortar. For every night I wept, for every dream I buried, for every piece of myself I gave away, I had this to show. But perhaps what I remember most was the quiet pride in my heart. Pride not for wealth. I was never wealthy, not for comfort, I had little of that. But for endurance, I had wrestled with life and carved a home from its cruelty. Still, I built it not for me, never for me. My eyes had seen too much to believe in rest or ease. No, I built it for him, for my son. I wanted him to have a foundation stronger than my own had ever been. I wanted him to step into manhood with roots, with walls to protect him, with a roof that would not leak when the storms came. Every mother dreams of giving her child the world. I could not give him that. But I could give him a house, my dream, and so it became more than stone, more than wood, it became my love materialized. A love that asked for nothing in return, though in secret, in the quietest corners of my heart, I hoped he would see it, not just as a gift, but as the story of my life carved into walls that would outlive me. When he was gone, I thought my heart could not carry any more weight. I thought grief had broken me for good. But life is never finished with you, even when you are finished with it. Not long after his passing, I held my son in my arms, small and fragile, his cries piercing through the silence of our home. His father would never hold him. He would never hear his first word, never see his first step. That truth nearly shattered me. Yet when my child's tiny hand curled around my finger, I felt something shift. My heart, though bruised and broken, began to beat with a new purpose. From that moment, I lived not for myself, but for him. The day my son was to be wed, I woke before the sun. My body was heavy with years of work, but my heart beat with a strange rhythm, half joy, half sorrow. I stood before the mirror, tracing the lines of age across my face, the silver woven into my hair, the quiet dimness in my eyes. These were the marks of sacrifice, the evidence of a life given away piece by piece. I remember the sound of laughter that morning, his laughter, so full, so alive. It filled the house like sunlight breaking through old, dusty windows. My son, no longer the small boy whose hand once clutched mine in hunger, but a man about to start a new chapter. I should have felt only joy, and yet, beneath the smile on my lips, a tide of sadness swelled. Because I knew what I was about to do. I took the folded papers from a wooden drawer, hands trembling as though the weight of them were heavier than stone. The deed to the house I had built with blistered palms and hollowed stomach, with tears and prayers whispered into sleepless nights. That house was more than walls, it was my very soul cemented into stone. And I was about to give it away. When I placed the papers into his hands, my voice faltered. "This is for you," I whispered, though my heart was shouting 1,000 things more. "This is my life. This is my love. This is every scar, every sacrifice, every night I went hungry so you could eat. This is the roof I dreamed you'd sleep under when I was gone. This is everything I have, everything I am. Please, please see it." He smiled, grateful, yes, but he could not know the weight of what he held. To him, it was a gift for his future. To me, it was the past, the present, and all that remained of me. As he tucked the papers away, his bride beside him, I stood silent. Around us, the room buzzed with chatter, music, the clinking of glasses. But in my ears, there was only a ringing emptiness, the echo of something breaking. I smiled through it, because mothers do. We learn to swallow our own hearts so our children may grow unburdened. Yet that night, when the house fell quiet and I was alone, I walked through its rooms as though I were already a stranger there. I touched the walls, the windowsills, the doorframe. My fingers lingered on the wood, and I whispered to the silence, "Take care of him. Keep him safe." I lay awake until morning, staring at the ceiling, realizing that in giving him the house, I had given him not just bricks and timber, but my dream, my identity, my final offering. It was not regret that filled me, but a hollow ache. The ache of a mother who knows that her love is too vast to be measured, too invisible to be seen. The ache of someone who pours herself out and is left empty, waiting, just waiting, to be remembered. The house was my gift. But more than that, it was my silent confession. This is how much I love you. More than myself. More than the life I could have lived. And though he did not see it, I gave it anyway. It came quietly, almost without warning. No storm announced it, no shadow crept across the sky to prepare me. His words arrived in the middle of an ordinary day, as sharp as glass, as cold as winter air. We were standing in the house I had given him. He stood tall, his voice steady, and he looked at me with eyes that once searched for comfort in my arms, but now held something else: distance. "Stay out of my marriage," he said. 6 words, only 6, yet they split through me like a blade pressed against old, fragile skin. For a moment, I could not breathe. The world tilted, the air grew heavy, and the silence after his words roared louder than any thunder. My lips parted, but no sound came. My hands, these wrinkled hands that had worked, fed, and carried him through life, trembled at my sides. He did not know, how could he? He did not know the nights I had gone without food so he could eat. He did not know how many times I had worked until my body screamed, just so he could grow in safety. He did not know that every brick in that house had been bought with the pieces of me I could never get back. And now, in the very home I built from my suffering, I was told I was no longer welcome, not in his choices, not in his life. It was not anger that burned inside me. No, it was something deeper. It was grief, a grief different from when I lost his father, yet just as sharp. To bury a husband is to lose a partner, but to be shut out by your own child is to lose a piece of yourself. I smiled, though my heart bled. My voice, when it finally came, was quiet, almost a whisper. "Of course," I said. I wanted to scream. "Do you not see me? Do you not know me? Do you not understand that everything you are stands on my broken back?" But I swallowed the words, as mothers do. That night, when I was alone, I walked the halls of the house again. But this time, it was different. Each wall pressed against me, each room echoed with the sound of his rejection. I sat in the quiet and stared at my hands. They had given him everything, and now they had nothing left to hold. I thought of the day I first placed him in his crib, his small hand curling around my finger. I thought of the nights I sang him to sleep, my voice cracked but tender. I thought of every step of his journey, how I had been there in the shadows, carrying him, protecting him, lifting him even when I was on my knees. And now, those same lips that once called me Mama had spoken words that cut me to my core. The truth settled in my chest like a stone. Love, no matter how vast, does not always return. Sacrifice, no matter how deep, does not always earn recognition. And children, no matter how loved, sometimes forget the soil from which they grew. But I did not forget. I could not. That was the night I decided. If my presence was unwanted, if my love was a burden, then I would take back what was mine. The house that was born of my suffering, carved out of my flesh, would no longer belong to one who could so easily dismiss me. It was not revenge. No, revenge is born from hatred. My choice was born from sorrow, from dignity, from the quiet strength of a woman who had given too much for too long. His words had shattered me, yes. But in the shards of that broken heart, I found something unexpected: resolve. And so, the house would return to me. The night after his words, I sat in the quiet of my room, staring at the cracked ceiling. Sleep would not come. It rarely does when the heart is heavy. I thought of my son's voice, sharp yet dismissive, echoing in my chest. "Stay out of my marriage." The words played over and over, each repetition like a hammer striking fragile glass. But beneath the ache, something stirred, a resolve I had not felt in years. It was the same fire that had carried me through hunger, through widowhood, through the endless nights of raising him alone. A fire I thought had gone out long ago. That night, it flickered back to life. By morning, I had made my choice. I walked through the house slowly, my fingers brushing the walls as though to say goodbye. Every corner held my story. I remembered patching leaks in the roof with trembling hands. I remembered scrubbing these floors until my knees ached. I remembered dreaming of this place long before it stood, dreaming of it as a sanctuary for the boy I raised. But if my love had no place here anymore, then neither would my sacrifice. Taking the papers back into my hands, I felt the weight of them press against my palm. They were more than ink and signatures. They were my years, my sweat, my broken body stitched into a single proof of existence. My son thought the house was his, but no gift could erase the truth. It was mine first, and mine it would remain. I did not storm, I did not shout. No, I moved with the quiet dignity of a woman who had learned long ago that power is not always in noise, but in silence. I reclaimed the deed without ceremony, without explanation. It was not revenge, it was survival, a reclamation of all I had given away without thanks. When I placed those papers safely away, something inside me eased, though sorrow still clung heavy to my bones. I sat by the window, light spilling across my wrinkled hands, and whispered to the empty air, "Forgive me, but I must protect what little is left of me." It hurt. God, how it hurt. To take back what I once gave with so much hope, it felt as though I were peeling my own heart out of his hands. But love does not mean surrendering until nothing remains. I had given, and now I had to keep at least one piece of myself, or there would be nothing left to bury when the earth finally called me home. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the house glowed golden in the fading light, I walked its halls not as a stranger, but as its rightful soul. The shadows seemed softer, the silence kinder, as if the house itself knew I had returned. I sat in the center of its heart, closed my eyes, and for the first time in many years, I breathed without fear. The house was mine again, not as a treasure, not as wealth, but as a witness to my pain, my love, my unyielding endurance. And though it cost me my son's closeness, I told myself it was better to hold on to this home than to lose myself entirely. Because sometimes, when the world has stripped you of everything else, taking back what is yours is not selfishness, it is survival. The nights after I took the house back were long, so very long. Silence wrapped around me like a heavy shawl, pressing against my ears until even the faintest sound felt louder than it should. The ticking of the old clock in the hallway became my only companion, each second falling like a drop of water in a cavern, marking the emptiness of time. I would sit by the window, my body small against the vastness of the night, and let the moonlight wash over my wrinkled hands. These hands, tired yet restless, would open and close in my lap, as if they still longed to hold something. A child, a memory, perhaps even forgiveness. The house creaked at night, the way old houses do. But for me, each creak carried a ghost, a memory. I would hear the laughter of a boy running down the hall, his little feet pattering against the wooden floor. I would hear the echo of a man's voice, low and tender, promising me forever before forever was taken from us. I would hear the soft hum of my own younger self, singing lullabies into the quiet, so the world would not feel so cruel. Now, those sounds lived only in my mind. The walls were hollow, the air too still. I thought often of my son, not with anger, but with a grief so deep it carved into my bones. I would ask myself, did I give too much? Did I smother him with sacrifice until love felt like a chain instead of a gift? Did he ever truly see me? Or was I only the shadow that kept him safe from the storm? Tears would rise unbidden, and I let them fall freely. At my age, pride has little use. Tears are softer than silence, and they remind you that you are still human, still capable of feeling even when the world has grown cold. Yet in those nights of reflection, something else stirred beneath the grief, a strange, quiet peace. For the first time in years, I was surrounded by the whispers of my own history without having to explain, without having to justify. This house, once taken from me in spirit, now breathed with my memories again. It listened, it held me, it bore witness to the fragments of my life that others had forgotten. Sometimes I would light a candle and walk the halls slowly, trailing my fingers along the walls. I spoke to the house as if it were a friend. I told it my secrets, my regrets, my hopes that someday my son might understand. The flame flickered in reply, and the shadows swayed like nodding heads. Those nights were lonely, yes, painful, yes, but they were also mine, and in them, I began to understand something I had overlooked all my life. Survival is not just about holding on. It is also about letting go. I could not change the past. I could not soften the words that shattered me. I could not force love where it refused to bloom. But I could sit here, in the quiet, in the house I had built, and claim my right to exist. To feel. To remember. And so, night after night, I reflected, not only on what I had lost, but on what remained: my dignity, my endurance, and a voice that still carried through the silence, even if no one else was listening. For in those reflections, I realized something powerful. Even if the world forgets me, this house, these walls, this air, they will always remember. I looked down at my hands, folded gently in my lap. They tremble now, not with fear but with age. The skin is thin, the veins pronounced, the fingers bent slightly from years of labor. To some, they might look worn, unsightly, a map of time's relentless passage. But to me, they are a scripture. Every line, every scar, every callus telling the story of my life. These are the hands that once held a child's fragile body close to my chest, rocking him against my heartbeat until sleep claimed him. These are the hands that washed clothes in cold water until my knuckles cracked. These are the hands that scrubbed floors, kneaded bread, stitched torn garments, and built a home where none existed. They are not pretty, but they are holy. Holy because they carried love in silence. Holy because they bore pain without complaint. Holy because they never stopped reaching out, even when they were pushed away. When I was younger, I thought legacy was something grand. A name etched in stone, wealth passed through generations, stories sung aloud. But I have come to understand that legacy is quieter. It lives in the invisible threads we leave behind. In the warmth of a meal once cooked. In the safety of a roof once built. In the strength of a child once carried. My son may not see it now. Perhaps he never will. Perhaps my hands, once his shelter, will remain only a memory that drifts faintly at the edges of his life. But still, I know these hands shaped more than wood and stone. They shaped a life from nothing. And in that, there is worth. I press my palms together and whisper into the still air, may these hands, though weary, leave behind something more than sorrow. May they teach that love is not always soft. It is often rugged, scarred, and heavy. But it endures. God, how it endures. The house listens. The walls breathe with me, the old wood creaking softly as if in agreement. I imagine long after I am gone, someone will stand in this very place. And though they may not know my name, they will feel it. They will feel the echo of my wrinkled hands in the warmth of the walls, in the sturdiness of the beams, in the quiet resilience of the home itself. And perhaps that is enough. Perhaps my legacy is not in being remembered by name, but in the endurance of love carried through sacrifice. My hands may fade, my body may turn to dust, but what I built, what I carried, what I gave, it lingers, quietly, in ways unseen. So let the world forget me, let the years erase my face. My wrinkled hands have already written their story, carved into the fabric of this house, this life, this earth. And if someday, in some quiet moment, my son looks at his own hands and wonders where their strength came from, perhaps then, just perhaps, he will see me, not in sorrow, not in anger, but in the quiet legacy of love that survives even the sharpest of words. If you are hearing me now, it is because my voice has outlived my body. Flesh is fragile, it fades, it withers, it returns to the earth. But words have wings. They carry across silence, they seep into walls, they float into hearts, even when the heart that spoke them no longer beats. I have lived through hunger and through love, through the ache of loss and the fragile bloom of hope. I have carried more than I thought I could, and I have endured more than I ever wished to bear. Yet here I am, my story still alive, even as my hands grow still. Perhaps I was not perfect. Perhaps I gave too much, held too tightly, hoped too deeply. But if there is one truth that I leave behind, it is this: love, even when unreturned, even when misunderstood, is never wasted. It shapes us, it defines us. It is the only thing that survives when all else crumbles. I look at my wrinkled hands one last time. They are still now, folded gently like a prayer. I see in them not weakness, but legacy. They have planted seeds I may never see bloom, carried burdens I may never have thanked, and held faces I may never hold again. And yet, they have not failed me. They were always enough. If my son ever remembers me, let it not be in my sorrow but in my strength. Let him remember that though words once shattered me, I chose dignity over bitterness, love over hate, survival over surrender. Let him remember that a mother's love does not vanish with rejection. It lingers, quietly, waiting, forgiving even when no forgiveness is asked. And if no one remembers me at all, if time swallows my name and the world forgets my face, I am at peace. Because my voice has already left its mark. It lingers in the walls of this house, in the air of these nights, in the whispered prayers that still hover like soft wings. I am not gone, not truly, for love, once lived, does not die. It becomes light, it becomes wind, it becomes the quiet strength that carries others forward. So let my story drift beyond time. Not as a plea, not as a sorrow, but as a gift. A reminder to whoever listens: survive, endure, love, even when it hurts. For in the end, it is not wealth, nor power, nor recognition that remains. It is only love, always love. And now, as my voice fades, I give you my final offering. Carry your pain gently, carry your love fiercely, and let your hands, however worn, leave behind a story worth remembering. Even when I am gone, I am here. In every breath, in every silence, in every heartbeat that dares to endure.